Hey there, and welcome to Strengthen Sisterhood, a podcast where faith, friendship, and fierce encouragement come together.
We're here to share stories that will inspire and lift each other up while we grow in faith together.
No matter where you are, we're here to remind you that you are never alone. With God and a little sisterhood, we're stronger together.
So grab a cup of coffee and get ready to be encouraged and empowered.
Hello, and welcome to Strengthen Sisterhood. We are your hosts. I'm Amy.
And I'm Summer.
And we are really glad that you're here today. How are you doing today, Summer?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good. I've just been eating my favorite popcorn.
Mm.
It's I know you like popcorn too.
Mm. There's
this Himalayan Gold. I think the brand is Lesser Evil. It's my favorite popcorn. It's so good. I could just eat a whole bag.
Popcorn makes pretty much any day better.
It does.
Yeah.
How's your day been?
My day's been pretty good.
Good.
I worked a little bit this morning. Had the afternoon off. It's warmer out today.
Yeah.
A little windy, but that's
sure.
okay.
Yeah, last night you were working late.
Yeah, I worked late.
I was feeling bad for that.
That's okay. My dog didn't like it either.
Oh, yeah, you told me. I could just imagine her just up on her back two legs, just whining at your door. That's so cute.
We're just creatures of routine and habit. And so it was like, she couldn't understand why everybody else was in the living room. Like, okay, supper's done. This is the time when we all go into the living room. You sit down, get the blanket.
Right.
I come up on your lap and you rub me. That's what's going through her mind.
Like, what's wrong with
This is the time where I get my rubs.
Yeah.
So, come on. And I heard this little, and I look over and there's this little chihuahua just waiting for me to come join the party out in the living room.
Poor thing.
Yeah.
Poor thing, you did that to her.
Yeah, that's okay though. So, episode 3.
Episode 3?
Today we are going to talk about Ebenezer. Here I raise mine, Ebenezer.
Tell us what Ebenezer means.
So Ebenezer, I was listening to, so I don't know if anybody else does this, but this is something that I have done since I was a teenager. Probably. I know my family does it. I know people in my family do this as well. So I don't know if it's just a family thing or if other people do this, but I like to listen to music when I get ready in the morning.
Yeah.
Shower, whatever, do my hair, paint the barn.
Yesterday I called it a bus on accident. And then I was like, oh, that's different.
Paint the barn. By paint the barn, I mean put makeup on.
Right.
So, which you didn't realize that.
I never knew that. I liked it. And you're like, it's actually not I don't know.
Not complimentary.
Not complimentary. I'm like, oh, well, I love barns. So I don't know. Seems fine to me to call it that.
Sure. So I was listening to music while I was getting ready. And that hymn, Come Thou Fount, came on.
Such a good song.
Oh, it's so good. And it actually has a really interesting history behind it, the man who wrote it. But that song was playing, and it just made me think of some of those verses. I mean, talk about depth and richness in those words. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Prone to wonder, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I love. There's so many good verses. But one of the verses in there is, here I raise mine, Ebenezer. And I've always wondered, why? When I hear the name Ebenezer,
I think Scrooge, right?
Yes!
Too.
How do you not think of Ebenezer Scrooge? Surely that does not mean the same thing.
Right.
So I actually just Googled it, because that's what we do.
Yep.
If I have a question, I'm just going to Google it. So what does here I'll raise mine Ebenezer mean? The word Ebenezer means stone of help. The Israelites saw the stone as a reminder of the Lord's power and protection, and it actually comes from, I think, 1 Samuel.
I think so, yeah.
And the Lord had protected the Israelites, and so Samuel set up an Ebenezer stone. And that's one thing that I thought was really interesting, is you read through the Old Testament especially, the Lord is all about, some people built an altar, Ebenezer stones, marking when God works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I kind of I'll get into this a little bit later in the episode.
It's okay. All those L's kind of tripped you up.
But I kind of called them landmark messages.
Oh, sure.
Benchmark messages,
yeah.
where you kind of just keep track of it. And the Lord does that. I see that throughout the Old Testament. He talks about, building an altar or raising an Ebenezer stone or just making those marks to remind us, because he knows that we need to be reminded as humans of his protection or his help or victories and things like that. So, but before we get into our Ebenezer stones, our discussion for today, we have to get to our fill up my cup moment.
Fill up my cup.
So, Summer, do you have a fill up my cup moment to share?
I do. I'm working on a ministry out of my home. And there's a few things that could be helpful to this ministry. Mm-hmm. And so I had this thing that came across my phone for $40.
Oh.
And I had no idea what it was for. It was like Apple. It was through Apple Pay of some sort, or Apple. I don't know. It was black and white, and it came up. I'd never seen it like that before, but somebody sent me $40. Well, later on in the afternoon, I was talking to this friend, and she said, "Hey, did you get the $40 I sent you?" I was like, "Oh, that was from you?" And I was like, "I had no idea." And she said she wanted me to go and purchase this. I needed like a bread slicer. You put a loaf of bread in it, and then you follow these guides so that it's sliced evenly.
Sure. Okay.
So anyways, because I cut myself 3 times in 1 week on my bread knife.
Ouch.
So yeah, and it would just be really nice to have even slices for this particular thing that I'm working on. So that was encouraging, like that somebody cared about what I was doing with this ministry.
Wanted to invest in it.
And I was like, oh, I love that so much.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that filled my cup.
That's awesome.
What about you?
So I had a fill my cup moment on Sunday.
Okay.
It was prior to, it was before Sunday school class started. Just sitting in my room talking with the fellow Sunday school teacher. And we have a very small class right now, which I'm fine with. I'm thankful for. Sometimes you need those little lighter years.
Well, because they're like 4, aren't they?
4 to 6.
4 to 6 year olds.
And so even though we have a small number, it can feel like a lot more.
Sure. Well, that age, yeah.
It feels like they multiply. They make up for 2 or 3 of themselves. But it was before class, and so it was quiet. We were just chit-chatting with each other. And one of our previous students, he has now grown up, moved on to the next class. But he came in, sat by, he was just walking down the hall. Thought he'd pop in and comes over and just puts his little arms around me and gives me a hug. And it was just one of those moments of like, just really needed a hug, buddy.
That is so sweet.
Thank you. And I'm very thankful. There's a couple of kids that pretty much every time they see me, one in particular, "Hey, Miss Amy, how you doing?" And he just wraps his arms around me. Aww. And I love that. I need that. It fills your cup. It fills my cup.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay, so that leads us into our discussion for today. So here I raise mine Ebenezer. We talked about it a little bit earlier about they are considered Ebenezer is a stone of help. Mm-hmm. And so it marks when the Lord has helped us.
Right.
So do you have an Ebenezer that you want to raise, a stone of help?
I have a couple.
Okay.
But I don't know that we have time for that. So
well, let's just get into it.
In September 2022, I went to like a camp meeting down in Florida, I guess you could call it.
Okay.
It's called a blowout. And you've been.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've been before.
Yes.
Anyways, it's a lot of preaching. So it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You get like 2 preachers on Thursday night, 2 Friday morning, Friday evening, Saturday morning, Saturday evening, Sunday morning, Sunday evening. It's like it's tiresome.
It is.
And I was going. It was my first time going with a couple friends of mine. And I was working at the Department of Health too at this time.
Okay.
And so life was really busy. So I was excited to get away and get a break.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to hear from the Lord. I'd heard about this particular meeting and just all that preaching. I wanted to hear from God. So I fasted that Thursday on my travel day. I think it's either Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which day I traveled on, but I remember I fasted that day. I've been praying all day. I felt like I needed to hear from the Lord on something, even though I kind of felt like I knew it's almost like I knew what I needed to be talked about or talked to. Like,
sure. Mm-hmm.
I knew what I needed, in a sense.
But just wanted to see if he would bring it up.
Yes. Or maybe there would be something else.
If the Lord would bring it up.
Yeah. You know, like, tell me what it is. You know, tell me, Lord.
I have a feeling it could be this.
Yeah.
But do you are we on the same page here?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that first message was Thursday evening. And right away, he pinpointed exactly what it was. But then I was like, no, because I'd been thinking about this.
Mm-hmm.
So this probably isn't it, you know?
Sure.
So then Friday morning and Friday evening come around.
Mm-hmm.
Pinpointed it again.
Oh.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't really want to do that, though.
Sure.
I don't want to do what you're asking me to do. So then Saturday morning, I think it was Saturday morning, I mean, it hit hard.
Sure.
And I thought,
bullseye.
Yes. And I knew it's like, no, there is no other option. I need to make this decision. What it was, the Lord had spoke to me about leaving my jobs.
Okay.
I was working Department of Health. I had another job at the clinic, part-time, picking up when I could during COVID. And then homeschooling my kids, which I did have a nanny that helped a ton during that time during COVID. But still, the Lord spoke to me about leaving my jobs. And so after that message, Saturday, I knew that if I waited until Monday or Tuesday when I got back to work,
sure,
I was going to talk myself out of it.
Oh, yeah.
The Lord didn't really want me to do that. You know, why would he want me to do that? So that I made that decision that day. I called my boss. I was still in Florida. I called my boss.
You called your boss.
I called her and just told her that when I got back, that I would be putting in my 4 weeks notice.
Sure.
Yeah, called her and let her know.
What was her response? Did you feel relief afterwards? Were you nervous about making that phone call, or?
I was nervous, but I was sure that I needed to do it.
You knew that's what he wanted you to do.
I knew for a fact, without denying, that's what I needed to do. And she received it well. I don't think she was. I think she wishes that I hadn't, because we were a pretty good team together.
Sure.
But I don't even remember exactly what I said to her, other than I've been here and I've been thinking, and I know this is what I need to do. I need to let go of the Department of Health job.
Sure.
And so yeah, that's what I did. I did end up quitting, but I didn't leave my clinic job yet. I held on to that.
Okay.
And just looking back, it's like somebody said it one time, delayed obedience is disobedience. And that has stuck with me ever since this moment, this time frame of going through some of this stuff. Okay. So, over the next year, the Lord had been pricking my heart even more, just different messages, preaching messages. Never in his word did he come out and say anything to me, but just in the preaching that we were getting at church and stuff. And I didn't listen because I needed to give up the clinic job too.
Oh, so that Saturday back when you were in Florida,
I needed to give up all of it.
All of it, but you did part of it.
I did part.
Okay.
So partial obedience is still disobedience.
Sure.
So partial and delayed. It's disobedience regardless. So yeah, I didn't listen to any of that though. Like I knew what I needed to do as well, but I still didn't. Apparently I just didn't learn my lesson the first time. And really what it was the fear of man that kept me from being obedient. I was a nurse. I'd gone to school for that. And I would wonder, well, what's so-and-so going to think? What are people going to think? I went to school for this. I'd only been doing it for like 6 years.
Well, it's part of your identity. I think our careers or whatever we do for a living we take that on as part of our identity. And so it's difficult the clinic, bravo on just knowing that, okay, I have to deal with this before I even go home. You made that call, but to fully sever and cut those ties, that's severing and cutting ties of part of your identity. Who you are. Because that's the most common question. When you introduce somebody or you meet somebody, you give them your name and typically your occupation.
Do? Yeah, what do you do for work?
So that's a part of your identity. So that's understandable.
Yeah.
Just completely understandable.
Yeah.
As far as the hesitation to fully obey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I'd wondered what family and other people would think of me leaving nursing, after spending time and money doing it, and all the effort that was put in, and too, like helping Brandon. What would people think, if Brandon's the only person working?
Sure.
Then am I going to look lazy for not helping him with finances and whatnot? So it really was my own pride that kept me from doing what I knew God had told me to do. So during this time also, my husband had gotten a job local in town. He was doing shift work before and traveling, 45 minutes back and forth to work each day. And so that was just really hard on him and, the time and stuff. But he had gotten this job in town. And so as the year went on, I thought, my daughter had went to go work there.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, because the Lord was still talking to me through the preaching. Sure. I needed to get rid of the jobs.
And you never really felt like he was in your day-to-day daily reading?
No, just in the preaching is when I would get it.
I'm glad I'm not the only one, because mine's similar to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, I'm in your word every day. Why are you not?
Right.
Why are you waiting until I'm in a room full of other people?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it wasn't, I had been praying about it, like, Lord, show me in your word that this is what you want me to do. And he didn't. He didn't. And so I can go work with my husband and my daughter, and help out there. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling the Lord, like, that this is okay because I'm working with my family. Mm-hmm. I'm not gone from my family. I'm working with them. The boys were able to come with me too, to work. And so I was like, this is good. Mm-hmm. So I did end up quitting. I don't know if I said that yet, but I did end up quitting the clinic job to go work for this company that my husband was with.
Okay.
But even still, it kept coming. It kept coming. And I remember, let's see, it was Valentine's Day. Mm. We had a homeschool co-op group party, a Valentine's Day party. Mm-hmm. Actually, let me back up. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So Sunday evening before Valentine's Day, Sunday evening service, it wasn't our pastor, but somebody was filling in for him, and they preached a message. And I can't even remember. I wish I would have wrote it down, but I cannot remember what the message was about. Mm-hmm. But whatever it was, mm-hmm. I knew in that moment, the same exact way I did back in 2022.
Sure.
There is no other option. I'm either needing to do this or not. Like it almost seemed like I felt like, and sometimes we get this way because of our flesh. We think that this is how God operates. But if I don't do this, mm-hmm. what does that mean? And I was so wanting to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. I mm-hmm. wanted to have a deeper relationship with him. So it was almost like I told myself when that moment came, that conviction came,
sure,
was like, if you don't do this, you're not going to be a disciple of mine. And not that that's what he said, but that's how I felt,
sure. Yep.
I wanted to be closer, and this is how I was going to get closer. So then I was like, I've got to quit this job too. Come on. So then I called my boss, and I spoke with her and asked her if she'd be willing to meet with me that week after because she was also going to be there with her kiddos at the Valentine's party. So after that was over, we met, let the kids play at McDonald's while I talked to her. And it was just so strange. It was honestly so awkward for me to be like, so I need to quit my job because the Lord wants me to. Sure. And I should have quit my job a couple years ago, all of my jobs. And I had to explain to her, like, I was trying to justify it because my family worked here, but for whatever reason, I need to leave my jobs. And that's hard because I am a worker. I liked being at work. And maybe that's what it was. Maybe part of it was the fact that I put too much mm-hmm. into my work. So yeah, I mean, I ended up leaving that job, and it wasn't until, let's see, February, the end of February. I don't know. It was sometime in February because that's what I have written down. But so within that month, I think it was actually within a week. That's what it was. It was 7 days later. Now it's all coming to me. It was 7 days later. So the following Tuesday, pastor had preached a message Sunday the Sunday prior about Judas and how Christ washed Judas's feet.
Yeah.
I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, I'm going to go read that myself this week. So Tuesday night, thinking about it, and I get in my Bible and I'm reading about, Judas and how Jesus washed his feet. But the reading was so good, I just kept on reading.
Sure.
And I got to John 15:2. Let me just pull it up here. When I got to John 15:2, all the praying that I had done, wanting to know if that's what God wanted me to do, this confirmed it for me, that I was in the will of God.
Sure.
I'll start with verse 1. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the husbandman. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. And I burst into tears, because that's exactly what I needed in that moment, to know that what I did was what he wanted me to do. Those jobs that I had, those were branches that weren't bearing any fruit for God.
Sure.
They weren't bearing any fruit. And so he had to purge that from my life.
All of it.
All of it. So that I can now
do
something that's going to bear fruit for him. And I remember I wrestled with it, even though I had that, I had been wrestling with it that whole previous week. Like, Lord, I'm going to have all this extra time. What am I possibly going to do? Like, yes, I'm homeschooling the kids. Okay, I can take care of the house and whatnot, but I just felt like I was going to have so much extra time. And I kind of think of it like, I tell people, it was almost like he hit me upside the head with a frying pan. Like, you idiot. You're going to homeschool your kids. You're going to take care of your house. You're going to take care of your husband. You know how you haven't been able to keep the laundry, staying on top of that? You're going to stay on top of the laundry.
Sure.
All the things. That's what you're going to do. And that's going to be enough. But in my mind, my pride says, it's not enough. People are going to think I'm lazy. People are going to think that, you're not helping your husband with the finances. And I don't know, just all those kind of thoughts come in.
Sure. Just the opinions of others.
Yes. Yeah. And just, I don't know. Anyways, it's silly, but it is what it is.
It's human.
It is. Yeah. And so that was just confirmation to me that he wants me to bear more fruit from him. And I just kept reading through the rest of the chapter even after that. It was so good. It was so good for me in that moment, and so sweet. And I just remember closing my eyes and thanking the Lord for that. And I didn't have to question, what am I going to do now? It was like, okay, this is enough. And at the beginning of the year, I don't know if you remember, but the beginning of the year that year, God had given me the word of rest. That was that was a theme for a while. And that was before I left. I even knew I was going to be leaving my jobs. And so, who would have thought, and I think you even mentioned it one time, well, it's the year of rest for you. So
it made sense.
If that's all, it made sense. That's all you needed,
Do you feel, since you have, so now that you're removed from quitting those jobs, do you feel like it is enough?
It is.
Yeah.
And he's given me other things to do. For a while, I can't remember I don't know the time frame off the top of my head, but looking at the time that I made that decision until, honestly, I'm just thinking, it was towards the end of that year. I had also been praying for the last 5 years to have someone to disciple.
Sure.
And I thought it was going to be another person, but that's not who it was. It's actually a really interesting story. Maybe I can share it if we have time. But so this person just randomly text messaged me. We started Marco Poloing that day. And within a week, I was sending her discipleship book to disciple her. And I'd been praying for that. And I remember telling her, like, this is so neat because I've been praying for this.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I don't know, it's an answer to prayer.
Yes.
But the coolest part is a year before that. So September is when she reached out to me.
Okay.
The September prior, a year before, on a Wednesday night, pastor had asked us to, we always do prayer requests on Wednesday night, but let's be more specific. Is there anybody that's been on your heart that you've been praying for, salvation-wise or things like that? And there was a ton. It was a long list of people that other people that we had all been praying for, Well, for whatever reason, I had thought of this after I started discipleship with this friend. And I was like, you know what? It came to my mind. Remember, I think I put their name down. And so I reached out to the pastor's wife and I said, I know this is probably a long shot, but do you still have that list of requests that night? And she goes, it's sitting right in front of me. I was like, no way. And she was like, yeah. And I said, can you look to see if such and such, and if their name is on there? And she sent me a picture of it and their name was on it from a year prior where I didn't know exactly what I was praying for, but they were on my heart.
Yeah.
And I prayed for them.
Yeah.
So that was just a cool moment.
Yes.
But anyway, so had I not left those jobs, I wouldn't have had the time to do that with her. And so I had to give something up so that God could replace it and something else can be there that can bear fruit for him, eternal fruit.
Right.
So it's just been a huge blessing.
When you talk about fruit, and it just makes me think of pruning.
Yeah.
You have to cut these things off in order for things to grow in its place.
Yes.
So, no, that's exciting.
It is. It's neat. It's kind of a long story, but, and it's kind of a while ago now, but I always think of that verse. And I've never felt since then as if, I missed this, or no, I'm on to new things now. And I am more fulfilled in what I'm doing now than what I was doing then. Sure. And I never could have imagined that would have been how I would feel now.
Yeah. So it's always interesting. And you talk about how now you're discipling somebody, you're in the process of discipling somebody. And we talked in our opening, and it'll probably come up throughout the episodes that we talk about, because our friendship was started in discipleship. And it's interesting. It's exciting for me. I remember how excited I was to have you come and ask to be discipled. And then it's exciting for me to see you then in turn disciple somebody.
Yeah, it's neat. I have such a burden and such a passion for discipleship. I don't know, I know it doesn't have to be one-on-one, but
there's something important to the one-on-one though.
I agree. Because you can't get certain things I couldn't have told you in front of a group of people.
Exactly.
It needed to be one-on-one for me to be open enough and comfortable to share certain things with you.
Yes. Well, and it's bonded.
Yes.
You bond with that person. And granted, you're the first person I've ever done that with. So I guess maybe not every experience is like ours.
Sure.
But, we definitely bonded through that. And you're right. There's something about that one-on-one environment.
There is.
That allows people to open up and maybe ask different questions.
Yes.
That, I don't know these people, or even if you're in a small group, like you said, it can be done in small group sizes and stuff like that. Any size, really. We're currently going through it at church.
Yeah.
As a congregation. Yeah. We're getting discipled. We're going through a booklet. And being taught how to disciple, which I think is great. And I'm thrilled about.
Yes, me too.
I'm thoroughly enjoying it, because even as somebody who is leading, if you are the discipler and teaching somebody these things, it's just good reminder of the things that we believe and why we believe it.
Absolutely.
And the doctrines that we hold dear and stuff like that. So that's exciting. So I'm really thankful that you follow through on the things that the Lord wanted you to do.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Because he has things for you to do. And it doesn't always happen immediately.
Right.
You're not the first person to have delayed
obedience. Yeah.
Obedience. Yeah. But
what about you?
That was really good.
Yeah.
So, and I like those Ebenezer verses, because now whenever you go into, what'd you say, John 15?
John 15 too.
That's what you think of.
Yes.
Like that's your mile marker.
Absolutely.
And that's what the thing I love about these Ebenezer, like the thought of those Ebenezer verses. And even learning what that Ebenezer stands for. Right. It's going to change how I sing, how I feel when I'm singing and worshiping in that song.
Yes. I meant to say, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I meant to say too, there was another verse that the Lord had given me during that time frame. It was shortly after he'd given me John 15 too. But it's 2 Timothy 2:21. This is when he had the younger men preaching. It's like 4 weeks, I think, of the younger men preaching. and one of them preached a message, and I don't know. It was 2 Timothy 2:21 that says, if a man therefore purge himself from these, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified and meet for the master's use, and prepared unto every good work. And that's the discipleship. That's the podcast. That's the ministry that I'm starting, from home or whatever.
Yeah.
I had to do those things, and he's preparing and, to be used for his glory.
Yeah.
I just, it's something I love it.
Things that you could not have imagined had you still stayed in those jobs and positions.
Yeah.
Even the one with the local business.
Right.
That your husband was working with. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. I love that.
Tell me about yours.
Okay, so here I raised my Ebenezer. For me, it's kind of similar. That's why I said, as you were going through your explanation of your Ebenezer stone, it wasn't necessarily particularly a verse. There are verses that are involved, right?
Right.
But it was messages. It was preaching messages, sermons that you sat through. Not necessarily your daily reading, because I have a similar, for me, when we talked about doing this episode, this topic, I was just I don't really know. I mean, I know I came up with the idea of it, but, and even in our explanation, my explanation to you of these verses, there were several verses that came to mind, but then it kind of transitioned into, as I thought about it more, sermons came to mind.
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier, benchmark kind of services, sermons where the Lord helped me in that message. I needed that message. Those kind of messages where you are sitting there and you kind of feel like a spotlight's on you.
Yeah.
So for me, the theme, I guess, is kind of that mine falls along. Yours was kind of along the lines of purging.
Right.
Right. Or pruning so that more fruit can grow. Mine is take up that cross. And I remember it was May of 2020. I remember our pastor preached on take up that cross and follow me. And it comes out of Mark 8, verses 34 and 35. And those verses say, and when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's, the same shall save it. And so I just recall the pastor was preaching about, take up that cross. And I feel like a lot of the stories that I'm going to talk about in the duration of our podcast are going to come out of the fact that I'm single and don't have kids. So if that gets annoying to people, I apologize, but that's my experience and that's what I have to draw from. But, and that's one of the biggest struggles that I've had. It's not an easy, it's one thing when you're in your young 20s to be the single friend.
Sure.
It's another thing when you cross that threshold into 30s and your friends are wrapping up their family.
Sure.
They're wrapping up the baby stages.
Yeah.
And now, even into my late 30s, now most of my peers have teenagers or are approaching those teenage years. And there are people that I had in my Sunday school class that are now having babies.
Oh, sure.
And that's just like I said, it's one thing to be in your 20s and going through that, and that can be difficult.
Yeah.
But it's another thing as you grow older and you're still the single.
Sure.
So the thing I remember from that message, though, was it was like the Lord was talking to me about take up that cross. Okay, so everybody has a cross, right? And we don't get to choose them.
Nope.
It's not like, okay, Amy, here you go. Here's, you can have the cross of this. You can have the cross of that. Take your pick. We don't get to choose it.
Yep.
He chooses them for us.
Yeah.
And the thing I remember from taking away from that message was, okay, Amy, so you're single and you don't have any kids. And that's the cross that I'm going to have you bear. And he kind of changed my perspective on that of throughout my 20s, I feel like I was preoccupied or spent a lot of time thinking about my singleness, right? Or just in the anticipation of expectation of like, well, it's going to happen eventually.
Sure.
And then I went into my 30s, and I remember at the end of my 20s realizing like, okay, Lord, I need some help here. Like, I want lasting contentment.
Sure.
I can't kind of do this like roller coaster where like 1 minute I'm up here and I'm fine and I'm being content, and then the next minute or the next day,
sure,
plummeting down and wallowing in discontentment.
Sure.
I wanted something more steady.
Yeah.
Like, I just need something a little bit more steady. I just can't do the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
And so I had asked him, like, Lord, I'm fine, honestly. If you want me to be single, I'm fine with being single, but you got to help me out here because I'm struggling in the contentment area.
Sure.
So if you can just give me something a little bit more stable with being content in that, then
yeah,
this will work.
Right.
And then I got into my 30s and still kind of thought those same things of, I want that lasting contentment. And then it kind of broadsided me.
Sure.
About not being a mom.
Sure.
Wasn't really expecting that. Like I said, spent most of my 20s
sure
thinking and struggling with my singleness. And then got that, was getting some steady contentment and thought, okay, I'm just going to ride this wave on out.
Sure.
And then get into, 33. I actually remember the day.
Do you?
When it hit me like a ton of bricks of like, I am probably not going to be a mom and not experience all the things
sure
that all my peers talk about.
Yeah.
And I have nothing to provide in those conversations. I don't know what it's like to have another human being grow inside of you. I don't know what it's like to experience all those things, the good and the bad,
right.
And I just have so like when it comes up in conversations and they tell stories of raising their kids or
sure
these different things, I just sit there and I feel like it's dull, like it just.
Well, I think you've honestly offered me a lot of help in areas because you are able to see an outside perspective.
Sure.
Well, and you have a mom.
I do.
So you do have a great mom. Shout out to Amy's mom. You do have a wonderful mother, but you do give a very good perspective because you're not distracted by some of those things. And so when I've asked you for help, I feel like you've been able to give me really good advice.
Sure.
In these areas. And you mentioned, about not junior church, but,
Sunday school.
Sunday school. We have a lot of kids in our church.
We do.
And so you're like a mom to a lot of kids in our church,
or a goofy aunt,
happily loved, And so I do believe God has been good in those ways.
He has.
To allow that to you, but I can see how that could be hard. And it makes me feel bad for complaining about my kids sometimes. Like, how annoying they can be.
Sure.
And rotten.
Well, it's one of those things like I can leave and I can get in a quiet car. Most of my friends can't say that.
Yeah, I can't say that.
Their cars aren't quiet.
I mean, I guess now that the kids are getting a little older, I can.
Sure.
But they're calling me because now they have phones. So now they're calling over and over again, text messaging me.
Yeah. And I am thankful the Lord has given me, I feel like he's given me a good relationship with a lot of the kids in our church.
Yeah.
That provide and fill some of those voids. But I do recall, having to deal, like I wasn't expecting that to be a battle that I would have to go through. And it took some years to kind of work through that. But coming back to that message from May of 2020, take up thy cross. Okay, I want you to be single and you're not going to have kids. You're not going to have a family. Like most women have. But I thought about it, like he changed my perspective on that in the fact of, I don't give this cross out to a lot of people.
Sure.
I don't give out the singleness, the majority of women, like I've always had this thought of, it feels like a circle, right? And here's just all the women, right? All the women are in this circle. Like just imagine like all these little dots, right?
Yeah.
And then and within that circle, just another very small, like almost close to the edge, almost the same exact size circle is all the women who are married.
Sure.
Right. And then you draw another little circle, almost the same size as on the inside, almost on the same size as the last one. And then those are all the women that are married. Or there's all the women, and then all the women that are married, and then all the women that have kids.
Sure.
And then like all these layers, right? And then they're homeschool moms and all so I feel like sometimes there's all these layers between me and my peers or my friends or all these other, and it just feels like here I am on the outer,
you feel like you're a circle on your own.
Outer circle. Yeah. Like not married, don't have kids, and I know that there are women that are married, but don't have kids.
Sure.
And so they feel that barrier.
Yeah.
They feel that barrier. Yeah, I guess it would be a barrier.
Yeah.
And I know that those are struggles, but going back to the thought of, that message of take up that cross, and we don't get to choose them, but the Lord chooses them for us.
Yeah.
And I sat there and thought, like, he changed my perspective and, he changed my mindset on that and was like, Amy, I don't give this cross out to very many people.
Wow.
A lot of women now, motherhood and homeschooling and all those things, those are crosses to bear.
Sure.
That I'm not bearing.
Sure.
But my friends and my peers are bearing those. But you also have others.
A community of people.
A community that's also bearing those, and that's strength and sisterhood.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it does feel kind of lonely being on that outer barrier of, well, I'm just a woman.
Sure.
I'm in the circle simply for that reason.
Yeah.
And then to have these kind of different barriers. But I'm very thankful that he changed my mindset on that of it's made it easier to bear at times.
Sure.
There's still struggles because it's a cross that we have to take up.
Yeah.
But I appreciate him changing my mindset on that because it's almost privileged.
Yeah.
Like it helps me feel almost honored.
Right. That's what
that he would ask me, like that he would be like, I got this cross. I know.
Sure.
I know who I'm going to give that cross to.
Sure.
I'm going to give that cross to Amy. And here's the other thing about that is I'm going to give her that cross because I know that she's going to need me. She's going to need to lean upon me.
Right.
Like this is the Lord's, thinking.
Yes.
She's going to have to lean upon me. She's going to have to lean not into her own understanding.
Right.
But acknowledge me and trust in me.
Yeah.
To give her the strength in order to bear that cross.
It allows you such a close relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because those other things, they're very good. They're distractions at times from the Lord.
Sure.
Responsibilities. Yep. I think of the verses. In
1 Corinthians. Is that what you're thinking? Like.
Well, I'm thinking about Paul, and how, and 1 Corinthians when it talks about marriage and stuff, and it talks about how, once a woman gets married, then she cares about the cares of her husband, which is good, and should be. But if God gave you this cross to bear,
right?
How much more time that frees you up to trust God? Not necessarily time, because you're still extremely busy. That's not what I'm saying. But you have more the ability to have a closer relationship with the Lord because you're not trying to separate out. Got to make sure this one's got this and my husband's got this and that one. I don't know. It's just.
Well, I can see things. Benefit. I can see situations in my life where I'm able to do this because I don't have my own household that I have to worry about. Now, like you said, it doesn't mean that I'm sitting over here twiddling my thumbs.
Absolutely. Right.
And have all this free time, immense free time.
No.
But
it frees you up for other things that he would have you to do. Whereas other people, you take certain kids out for their birthdays. I can't necessarily do that with other people,
right.
But you have the ability to kind of invest into those other people's lives where maybe that's needed,
But it's like your jobs. By taking away those jobs or having you giving up those jobs, it has freed you up for other ministries, other things that he desires for you to do.
Right. Yeah.
Same with me for okay, Amy, I'm not going to have you have these things in life, but through you, I'm going to work these things out.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
it's incredibly hard. I remember that message, like, it just kind of broke me. And I remember there was a message. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you feel like over the years that gets a little bit easier? Like, yes, still there, but do you feel like it gets easier as the years go by? Or do you feel like it stays about the same? You kind of...
I feel like there is an ebb and flow to it.
Sure.
I feel like there are times it is still a constant companion.
Sure.
Or a constant thought.
Yeah.
It's never far, let me just say it this way. It's never far from my mind.
Sure.
And I read things on it. I've read recently about, somebody who's in their third, aging and still single. And they said, what's the hardest day of the week? To be single. And this lady got on there and she's like, Sunday mornings. I was like, amen.
Sure.
Why? And she goes on to give these explanations, and some of them were particular, obviously, to her, but some of them definitely resonated. Like, yeah, it is not fun. Like, it's just one of those things that my mind always catches. These little things, like sitting in church and, the husband puts his arm around his wife.
Sure.
Or the husband's leaning forward and she's, scratching his back or rubbing his back. Or a family leaves church and after a Sunday morning and they're walking to the car and you see the kids holding their parents' hands.
Sure.
And she's like, all those little moments.
Yeah, you're seeing.
And it's just like, I don't have those.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, the little guy giving me a hug on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Such a big thing.
Sure.
Whereas maybe it's not to other people.
Yeah.
But it's a big thing to me.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Yeah. Take up that cross. And it's one of those things, like last year, I remember our pastor preached a message on when God tells you no.
Mm-hmm. That was a good message.
And that message broke me.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those messages of, I really don't want to sit here and listen to it, because I had allowed a hardness. Mm-hmm. Like you asked, does it get easier? Well, like I said, there's an ebb and flow to it. Mm-hmm. There are times where it's easier than others.
Right.
And I don't always know when those times are going to be.
Sure.
But last year, I had allowed a hardness to grow within me about that. And the Lord knew it. And kind of, even with yours, like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And no, Lord, I don't really want to talk about that right now.
Yeah, I put his finger on it.
Yeah. Too many emotions. I can't do that now. And he was tender and kind and patient, like he always is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then a couple weeks later, or a little bit of time later, kind of pulls it up again.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, Lord, I don't really want to talk about, not right now. I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
And then a Sunday morning comes along and the Lord just like rolled up his sleeves and was just like, buckle up.
Yeah.
We're addressing it, and we're addressing it now.
Right.
And I remember, after that message was preached, we got up and we sang, because we always kind of end the service with a song, like an altar call. I couldn't budge. Like, it was hard enough to even just stand up. And I couldn't budge to even go forward and pray. Sure. Like, go to do an altar call. And the song that we sang, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember there was a line in there. And it said something about take me by the hand. Mm. Or hold my hand.
Sure.
And I had held in tears or wiped away small ones throughout the message. But I couldn't sing. I barely hummed that. And it took all the strength within me not to just flat out break out and break down.
Yeah. Wow.
Which I didn't want. It wouldn't be wrong to do that. It's not wrong to do that. Sometimes it's good to show other people, like, hey, messages still speak and break us down. Mm. But again, fear of man, pride of just not wanting to admit it, and also just trying to understand, like, how do I deal with this? Like, I just felt like I needed to deal with it or process it with the Lord.
Like you knew it was time to. Like, okay, I can't really hide behind this or put this off anymore.
And thankfully, a couple weeks after that, I was able to even just testify of the Lord's goodness on giving me those reminders. So a lot of times he'll just give me those reminders and messages of like, okay, we need to deal with this.
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting a little hardness on that. Remember,
sure,
it's a cross and I've given it to you to bear.
Right.
And so I'm thankful that from time to time when I need it,
that comes up.
Yeah. And he's patient. He doesn't always make me deal with it initially.
Sure.
Okay. I'll ease off. And sometimes he knows exactly when I need it.
Right.
Yeah,
he does.
Or he allows me to push it to a certain degree.
That's his long suffering. Like,
yes.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yep.
But that's good. Yeah, I like that.
So that will transition us into our gratitude. So what is one thing that you are thankful for this week, Summer?
I am thankful for reconciliation. Just opportunities when conversations or situations happen. Just the opportunity to reconcile. They're not always fun when they happen, but I found myself in this situation this last week of just being thankful for it, even when I was still mad about it.
Sure.
Truly, I'm like upset, my blood pressure is high.
Yep.
But I found myself saying, you know what, this was a good opportunity to reconcile a few things. So thank you, Lord. Like I know from previous experiences, and that's something else that could be talked about later maybe, but other instances where you go through something hard, but then you come out on the other side of it. And so because I've been through that in other situations, I knew that this one, upsetting as it was, that we can reconcile it and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm grateful.
It's the dirty work, it's, it's hard.
What about you? What's yours?
For my gratitude, I'm thankful for, it kind of just falls in line with this topic. Here I raise my Ebenezer comes from a hymn, Come Thou Fount. And I'm thankful that my thankful moment, I guess, for this week would be our song service on our last church service that we had.
Oh, sure.
We sang There Is a Fountain.
I love that song.
And there's a fascinating story behind that song. And I listened to it on a podcast once, and it's very interesting. And so it's one of those songs of once you know the story of it. So if you don't know the story of it, go and look it up. Very interesting story of the man who wrote that song. And then we finished out the song service with Saved by Grace.
Okay.
And that song, every time we sing it, I realized, it was a couple years ago, I realized it's written by Fanny Crosby.
Is it really?
It is.
Wow.
And that's the thing that I find so fascinating about Fanny Crosby, because you read the words. Fanny Crosby was blind since a child.
Yeah.
Since a child, like an infant.
Right.
And yet you sing the words of this song, and it is, and the chorus, and I shall see him face to face and tell the story saved by grace. And I shall see him face to face. And then I get chills every time we get to the third verse. A blind woman wrote these words. Someday when fades the golden sun, beneath the rosy tinted west, my blessed Lord will say, well done, and I shall enter into rest. I mean, I got
same.
goosebumps.
I got the goosies.
How in the world could a blind woman write the golden sun and the rosy tinted west? The rosy tinted west. So I am thankful for hymns that minister, which even gave us the idea for today's topic.
Yeah.
Here I raise my Ebenezer, which is another Come Thou Fount, another fascinating story behind that hymn.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember we went through a book like that, or we kind of started.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do a
those.
couple of podcast episodes on
A scuffle.
I mean, like I said last week, my brother, or in our private episode, my brother does a podcast. My brother's podcast, though, the interesting thing is it's his story through hymns. And so he takes these hymns
Sure.
and he shows how they point to Christ.
I like that. That's cool.
And so it's not just the history behind some of these hymns. He does get into that, but I just like how he points, you can see through, like, not just scripture pointing to Christ, but also these hymns, which are chock full of scripture.
Absolutely.
A lot of them.
Yes. Yeah.
And how they just point to Christ. So,
yeah, I like that. Well, that's good. I really enjoyed our conversation today. And
I did too.
Kind of reminiscing on the things that the Lord has given us, to those stones that we can go back to.
Yes.
And, I don't know. They're just good.
Here I raise mine Ebenezer. Hither by thy help I'm come.
Amen.
I love that. Well, I hope you can join us next week when we talk again. And feel free to follow us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube,
Amazon Music.
You can
Instagram.
You can contact us through Instagram, which is Strength and Sisterhood Pod. And you can also email us at strengthandsisterhoodpod@gmail.com.
Yes.
So until next week, I'm Amy.
I'm Summer.
Thank you for joining us. See you later.
Bye.